Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. I thought our relationship was built on trust, but everything changed the day I found his phone unlocked. At first, I didn't think much of it, but curiosity gnawed at me. A few innocent messages couldn't hurt, right? But what I found wasn't innocent at all. It was explicit. His secret, something he never shared with me, was right in front of me. My heart sank. It wasn't just one message or a single video. There were dozens, a whole collection. Each video, each image, left me more confused and betrayed. I had thought we shared everything, but this was something hidden, a world I had no clue about. Was I really that naive, or had he been hiding it from me all along? I didn't know what to believe anymore. I couldn't stop looking. Every message felt like a punch in the gut. I kept scrolling, each video revealing more of his secret world. My mind raced. How long had he been hiding this? Did I ever know the real him? The man I married had a side to him I never imagined. My feelings were a mess, confusion mixing with anger. Why hadn't he told me? Was it something I should have known? It was overwhelming. Every message, every video, confirmed what I'd feared. My husband had a fetish, something he never told me about. I felt betrayed. How could he keep such an important part of himself from me? Our marriage had always been about honesty, openness, but this was a breach of trust. He wasn't the man I thought I knew, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I couldn't ignore the thoughts swirling in my mind. Why didn't he share this with me? If we were truly open with each other, why did he keep it a secret? I tried to push the thoughts away, but they kept coming back. He'd never mentioned anything like this before. Was I not enough? Or had he been too ashamed to tell me about it? I needed answers, but I wasn't sure I was ready to hear them. I knew I had to confront him. The longer I waited, the worse it would get. But how could I bring it up? What could I possibly say? I saw your fetish videos? That seemed too strange, too raw. What would he think of me for going through his phone? Would he be defensive? Or would he finally admit what had been eating away at him all this time? I wasn't sure. The conversation was harder than I imagined. When I finally asked him about it, he looked shocked, caught off guard, almost. But his hesitation told me everything I needed to know. He didn't want to talk about it, but he couldn't avoid it anymore. His guilty eyes told me more than his words ever could. There was shame, but there was also fear. Fear that I might leave him. He tried to explain, but it didn't make sense to me. He claimed it was something he'd never planned to involve me in, but how could he keep it from me for so long? His words didn't make the pain go away. The more he talked, the more I realized just how much he had kept hidden from me. This wasn't just a small secret. It was a part of him I'd never known. And now, everything felt wrong. I couldn't stop replaying his words in my head. It's just a fetish, he said. It doesn't mean anything about us. But it meant everything to me. It felt like I didn't know him anymore. Was this something that could be accepted? Could I just move past it? The truth was, I didn't know if I could. The trust we had built was shattered, and I wasn't sure how to rebuild it. Days passed, but nothing felt normal. I kept thinking about the videos, the messages, the truth he had hidden from me. I wanted to forgive him. I wanted to move on, but the damage was done. Every time I looked at him, I saw the man who had kept secrets from me, and I didn't know how to get past it. Was I being too hard on him, or was I right to feel betrayed? I wasn't sure what to do next. The silence between us grew unbearable. I couldn't look at him without seeing the videos in my mind. The love I thought we shared felt different now, like something I could never touch again. Every time he reached out to hold me, I recoiled. How could I pretend everything was fine when I knew the truth? Could I ever look at him the same way again? I started to wonder if I was being unfair. Maybe I should be more understanding. He had admitted it, after all. But the thought of what he'd kept hidden for so long gnawed at me. Why didn't he trust me with this part of himself? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't just about the fetish. It was about the deception. He'd lied to me, and that hurt more than anything. He told me he never meant for me to find out. But that didn't make it easier. How could I believe him? Everything seemed like a lie now. How much of our marriage had been built on truth, and how much had been hidden behind a mask? He begged me to understand, but how could I? I felt like I was standing in the wreckage of something that had once seemed perfect. The days turned into weeks, and I still couldn't make sense of what had happened. I loved him, but something inside me had broken. Could I forgive him? Could I accept this side of him that I never knew existed? I tried to imagine a future with him, but every time I did, the images of the videos and the messages haunted me. The trust was gone, and it felt like I was trying to rebuild from ruins. We tried counseling, but it didn't feel like enough. How could a therapist fix something so deeply personal? How could anyone repair the bond between us when it had been fractured so completely? He kept promising that he'd never keep another secret, but how could I believe that? His past actions spoke louder than his words. My heart wanted to trust him, but my mind kept warning me to be cautious. The guilt he carried was palpable. He kept apologizing, but it didn't change the way I felt. I wanted to scream, to ask him why he couldn't have been honest with me. But every time I tried to talk about it, the conversation ended in tears and silence. How could I tell him how much this hurt without sounding like I was blaming him for everything? Was this my fault for not seeing the signs? I started asking myself hard questions. Could I live with this? Could I continue a life with someone who had kept such a secret from me? I kept remembering the happy times, the way we laughed together, how comfortable we were with each other. But now it felt like all of that was built on a lie. I didn't know if I could get past this. If the person I had loved was even the person I thought he was. I found myself distancing from him more and more. It wasn't intentional, but every time I looked at him, the truth loomed over me. He noticed the shift. He begged for my attention, my love, but I couldn't give it. How could I give him my heart again after he'd taken it and shattered it? His fetish didn't feel like a simple preference. It felt like a betrayal, like he had been living a double life. I kept asking him why. Why didn't he tell me? Why did he hide this part of himself from me? But his answers were always vague, evasive. He said it was his thing, his private side. But what did that mean for us? If he could hide this, what else could he be keeping from me? I wanted to believe him, but every time I tried, doubt clouded my mind. His words no longer felt reassuring. They felt like more lies. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed the signs? There were moments when I felt like I could almost see him, the real him, underneath the man he had shown me. But then, there were other moments when I wondered if that man ever truly existed. Was I even in love with him? Or was I in love with an image I had created in my head? I started to wonder if this was a side of him he'd always known about, or if it was something new. Could this fetish have been something that developed over time, or had it been with him from the start? I couldn't stop questioning everything, even the simplest things we had shared. Our entire relationship began to feel like a lie. I had no idea who he really was anymore. I couldn't bring myself to touch him anymore. Every time he tried, I flinched. It wasn't just physical, emotionally, I was shutting down. The thought of intimacy felt tainted by everything I had learned. How could I go back to the way things were when I knew the truth? How could I pretend it was all okay? My body and mind were screaming for distance, but he kept reaching out, wanting things to go back to normal. I confronted him again, and this time, I demanded answers. He looked at me, pleading, but I didn't care anymore. I needed the full truth. What else had he been hiding? Was this just the tip of the iceberg? He told me it wasn't that simple, but I wasn't satisfied. I had to know everything. His silence only made me more suspicious, but it also made me more determined to find out what was lurking beneath the surface. His answer was almost dismissive. "It's not a big deal," he said. "Why are you making this such a big thing?" But to me, it was everything. It wasn't just about the fetish. It was about trust, about the hidden parts of his life that I had no access to. How could he belittle it? Like it didn't matter. I wanted to scream, to demand that he understand how much this hurt. But instead, I just sat there, numb. I needed a break from him, from everything. I took time away to clear my head. I went to visit a friend, hoping to find some peace. But even when I was away, the images kept haunting me. I couldn't escape it. How could I go back to my life knowing what I knew now? Every conversation with him felt like a trap. I didn't want to hear his excuses anymore. I just wanted the truth, the raw, painful truth. When I returned home, everything felt off. The air between us was thick with tension. He looked at me like he was waiting for something. waiting for me to say the words, to give him permission to make things right. But I didn't know how to say those words. How could I say I forgave him when I didn't even know if I could trust him anymore? The damage was done, and I didn't know if it could ever be fixed. I started questioning my own feelings. Was I being too harsh? Could I accept this? But then, I remembered all the times he'd held back, all the times he'd kept this side of himself hidden. It wasn't just the fetish, it was the fact that he had felt the need to keep it from me. How could I continue to love someone who had been hiding such an integral part of themselves from me? The more I thought about it, the more the love seemed distant. He apologized again, but the words felt empty. It wasn't enough. His apology didn't change the fact that he had hidden something so important. I kept wondering if I could ever look at him the same way. Could I really go back to the way things were, to the life we had built together? The more I tried, the more the trust seemed broken beyond repair. I didn't know how to move forward, or if I even wanted to. The more I dug into the situation, the more I realized I had been ignoring the signs for years. It wasn't just the fetish. It was the way he had always kept parts of himself locked away. Maybe this was just the final piece of the puzzle, the thing that had broken the illusion. Maybe I had been so in love with the idea of him, the version of him I created in my head, that I had never truly seen the man in front of me. The day came when I asked myself, can I forgive him? I wanted to, part of me did, but the truth was that I didn't know if I could. I loved him, but I didn't trust him. And without trust, what did we really have? Our marriage felt like it was built on shifting sands. Everything I thought was solid crumbling beneath me. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know if I even could. I spent days reflecting on everything. The lies, the secrets, the distance between us. He kept asking for another chance. But how could I give him one? How could I trust that he wouldn't hide something else from me? My heart ached because part of me wanted to believe him, but another part of me knew I couldn't ignore the doubts creeping into every corner of my mind. We tried to rebuild, but every conversation felt like we were walking on eggshells. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. Every time we were together, I kept replaying the images in my head. It wasn't just about the fetish, it was about the secrecy, the lack of communication. How could we move forward when everything we'd built was tainted by hidden truths? I found myself pulling away more and more. The connection we once had felt distant, fragile. When he reached out, I flinched. I hated myself for doing it, but I couldn't help it. I wanted to trust him, to love him like I used to, but it felt impossible. The foundation we had built was cracked, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't seem to fix it. The love I had felt was now replaced with uncertainty. His attempts to win me back were relentless. He brought me flowers, wrote me heartfelt letters, but nothing worked. I could see how badly he wanted things to be okay, but the damage was deeper than he realized. Every sweet gesture felt like an attempt to fix something that couldn't be fixed. I wanted to believe he was trying, but all I could think of was the hidden side of him, the side I hadn't known about until it was too late. We had a long talk one night, and he told me the truth. The fetish was something he'd struggled with for years. He had always been ashamed of it and never thought it would affect our relationship. But now that it had come to light, he was desperate to make things right. He didn't want to lose me. But the more he talked, the more I felt like I was listening to a stranger. Was this the man I had married, or was he just a facade? I asked myself if I could accept this side of him. Could I overlook the years of secrecy and embrace him for who he truly was? But every time I tried to convince myself, doubt flooded my mind. Could I really be with someone who had kept this part of themselves hidden from me for so long? I couldn't help but feel betrayed, and I didn't know how to move past it. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to. I decided to take some time apart, hoping it would help me sort through my emotions. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I needed to be true to myself. I couldn't continue to ignore the way I felt. The truth was, I didn't know if I could forgive him. I didn't know if I could accept his fetish as a part of him. What if this was just the beginning of more hidden parts of his life? How could I trust him again? The separation was harder than I thought. Every time I tried to focus on something else, my mind would drift back to him. I missed the man I thought I knew, the one who made me laugh, who held me close at night. But now, all I could think about was the man who had kept secrets from me. Could I ever get back to the place where everything felt right? Or was this the end of the relationship we had built? He called me daily, begging for a chance. He said he was willing to do anything to prove he was committed to us. But nothing seemed to make a difference. His words felt empty, like promises I had heard before. How could I trust that he would change when I had already caught him in a lie? The more he tried to convince me, the more I felt like I was drowning in his guilt, his regret. It wasn't enough. After weeks of uncertainty, I made the hardest decision of my life. I asked for a divorce. It felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, but at the same time, my heart shattered. The love I had for him was still there, but the trust was gone. I couldn't live in a relationship where I was constantly questioning everything. He begged me to reconsider, but deep down, I knew it was the right choice. It was time to let go. The days after the divorce were filled with mixed emotions. I felt free, but also incredibly lonely. It was like I had been living in a fog for so long, and now that I could see clearly, everything felt uncertain. The emptiness of our home hit me harder than I expected. I missed the comfort of his presence, but I knew I couldn't go back. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back. I started focusing on myself for the first time in years. I took up hobbies I had abandoned, spent more time with friends, and began to rediscover who I was outside of our marriage. But even as I moved forward, I couldn't shake the thought of him. Was he really the man I thought I knew? Or had I been living in a dream all along? Every new experience I had felt tainted by the past. The more time passed, the more I started to heal. I realized that I didn't need to be with someone to feel complete. I was strong enough to stand on my own. But there were still moments when the memory of him would surface and the ache would return. I couldn't deny that a part of me still missed him, but I knew that missing someone didn't mean I had to go back to them. Months went by, and I started dating again. It felt strange at first, but liberating too. I was finally able to connect with someone new without the weight of my past holding me down. As I opened my heart to new possibilities, I realized just how much I had been holding on to. I had spent so much time trying to fix a relationship that was beyond repair, but now I was free to build something new. The first time I ran into him after the divorce, my heart skipped a beat. He looked different, older, regretful. But I couldn't let him back into my life, no matter how much he seemed to want that. I had come so far, and I couldn't risk falling back into the same pattern. We spoke briefly, and he apologized again. But this time, it didn't feel like it mattered. I had learned to let go. I realized that the hardest part of the divorce wasn't letting go of him. It was letting go of the idea of us. I had spent so long believing in the future we could have had, but that future no longer existed. He wasn't the person I thought he was, and I wasn't the person I used to be. I had changed, and so had he. The relationship we had was gone, and I had to accept that. One evening, I sat down to write about everything I had been through. Writing became my therapy, my way of processing the heartbreak, the anger, and the betrayal. As I wrote, I realized just how far I had come. The woman who had once been so lost in her marriage was no longer the same. She was stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next. Time had a way of healing wounds I didn't even know I had. The pain of the divorce was still there, but it wasn't as raw. I had found peace in my own company, and I had finally stopped questioning myself. I no longer wondered if I could have saved my marriage. I knew that I had made the right choice, no matter how painful it was. I was living for myself now, not for someone else. I saw him again at a mutual friends gathering. It was strange, almost like we were strangers. The man I had married wasn't the man standing in front of me anymore. He had changed, just like I had. We exchanged polite pleasantries, but there was no spark between us. The love that had once felt so strong was now a distant memory, something that no longer had a hold over me. And so, life moved on. I had found a new version of happiness, one that was all mine. The man I once loved was just that, a memory. The pain had faded, and in its place, there was freedom. I had learned so much about myself, about trust, and about what I was truly worthy of. As I moved forward, I knew that whatever the future held, I was strong enough to face it on my own terms. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you like the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.